Welcome to the Ranking Revolution podcast, your source for your strategies and tips for SEO, marketing, organic growth, and online business. This is part 2 of the interview with Jared Bauman. In part 1, we talked about a day in the life running an SEO agency. And in this episode, part 2, we talk about building a personal brand. He has a project called Weekend Growth, and it's a newsletter, a blog, technically, and a YouTube channel as well. So we get into the details of running that and why he's doing it. I mean, Jared is fairly busy. He has a lot of stuff going on, but he also wanted to do this weekend growth project as well. So we get into all the details there, and I'll link up for all the places that you should go follow Jared. He's the podcast host over at the Niche Pursuit Show, which I'm a big fan of. And you can listen to him interview people over there if you want to. But anyway, let's get to the interview with Jared, and he'll talk about weekend growth, his personal brand project. But let's talk about weekend growth in that project. So what's the goal with that? Let us know like what the platform and what you're trying to do with it. And then I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about it.
Weekend growth would best be characterized as my personal brand, I suppose. I don't really know the exact right way to define it. I just started a little over a year ago. But it's basically a place for me to share ideas, results, cool things I'm trying, different things that I've seen work, different things that I'm seeing not work. I would get enough of those questions online, whether it was on Twitter or whether it was in an email form. And I did also want to just explore this idea of kind of having a personal brand. I hadn't done that before. I've never done it in the past where had a personal brand, but I did notice like, at my last company, Shoot.edit, the fact that I was a known entity as a person, the fact that I spoke at conferences in the industry, the fact that I was quoted or got asked my opinion on things for publications, that helped the company, right? Like having me as an expert on my own helped the business. And I always took that with me. So Weekend Growth is a bit of a channel, if you will, to talk about the things I'm seeing working at the agency, share that with other practitioners, talk about my side projects because I like having side projects. They're also very important for 201 Creative as a business. I can talk about kind of why that is. And so I can share about my side projects and share about what's working there, share about their connections, and just build an audience around people who want to kind of see what's working, kind of hear my thoughts on what I'm going after and why I'm going after it. That was the starting spot for it. And that's where it started about a year plus ago.
So yeah, so much to unpack there. I mean, you have the agency. It sounds like it keeps you pretty busy. You are the host of Niche Pursuits, which you've been doing that for, I think, a few years now, right?
Almost 3 years, I think. Yeah.
3 years. And you're a public speaker as well. So you do go to some conferences. And basically, it sounds like you're a little bit busy. You have a family. There's other stuff to do. Why can't you not do this? Why can't you just not share this stuff? And I have the same issue myself. So what's your reason?
Well, it started as a challenge on the Niche Pursuits podcast. Spencer and I were challenging ourselves to have some goals around side hustles. And I thought, I've been noodling on this for a while, so why don't I just actually do it? Again, going back to, I get a lot of questions about this stuff. I've got a lot of cool data. Like I get to look at hundreds of Google Search Console accounts every day from current clients and past clients. And we do a lot of cool things and we have a lot of cool stories and et cetera, et cetera. So the challenge was for me to get to 1,000 email subscribers in 3 months on this brand. But what I realized within 3 months is that I was getting clients from the newsletter. I was getting people reaching out to 201 Creative saying, hey, can you help me with this website? Can you help me with this business? Hey, I listened to the Niche Pursuits podcast. That's how I found out about you, but I didn't know you did SEO at your agency. And I actually am the marketing director at this e-com store. And so within 3 months, I already had a bit of a use case here that this email newsletter was driving business to 201. So then it became about how can I find time to do it every week? So it's not just a sprint anymore. Now it's a marathon. How can I make sure that it's providing value while also providing some business value? And so that became the goal. And I've managed to find a way to do it every week to share tangible results or ideas with people that, they're interested in. I'm judging that by like open rates and things like that, by list growth, and then also do it in a way that it doesn't rob me of an entire day or half day of my productivity.
Can you share the size of the email list? And it's okay if you don't want to share that, but just curious.
Yep. It's at 4,000 right now. So it's not big. It was at 5,000, but I practiced what I preach and I deleted the bottom 20% of the list that was not performing well. So that's what we tell our clients to do is, maintain good list health. And we just did it over there at We Can Grow. So 4,000 pretty engaged people at this point.
And then what are the open and click-through rates?
Yeah, now that we knocked off that 20%, the open rates have been about 55, 56% the last couple of weeks since we did that. Click-through rates are not good, but that's because very few of my emails kind of have a call to action. It's basically for better or worse. And believe me, Doug, for worse sometimes. I get everyone on my team laughs at me. They're like, how long is Jared's email going to be? Let's get the word count this week. So probably for worse, but I kind of write everything on the page and don't really call you to take action. I just kind of give you the whole thought right there. So
got it. Well, and I think obviously it's working. 55% in this industry is astronomical. That's pretty amazing. And I mean, 4,000 or 5,000, like that's pretty big, like overall. So it's all relative.
It's all relative, right?
Yeah.
I always tell people I talk to people who have B2C email lists that are in the hundreds of thousands, right? And at Shoot.edit, I think our list was over 100,000. We were sending over 1 million emails a month. So I know bigger email management, but it's just a different ballgame when you're in a B2B space and you're talking to people. And when I get a conversion per se, it's not really a conversion focused email. If you get on my list, you'll find I'm not really calling you to buy something very often, but just the brand awareness. When I get a conversion that comes from the email list, it's usually pretty high revenue, right? So you don't need a lot of those conversions to all of a sudden look and go, hey, that was worse than an email this week,
And what are you selling, or what might be the offers in those emails?
So we have some smaller services for people that aren't these big brands, right? And that's maybe a website review or consulting. And that's often a great, low barrier to entry sort of product. But a lot of the times we're just sharing, hey, here's a local business. Here's where the results have been. Here's what we did. Let me know if you have any questions. And people will reply to the email or kind of just basically get satiated by looking at that. And whether that gets forwarded to someone or that, goes out to a local business owner, just the very fact of kind of sharing different results or different approaches tends to get someone calling about, our monthly services.
Okay.
And again, it's a very low percentage, to be clear. 4,000 people on the list, I'm not getting 40 inquiries every single time I send an email. That's not at all. It's very, very small, but the impact is great and the revenue potential from that is great. So to your point, it's all relative.
And let's see, it sounds like it's a newsletter number one, and then you do have a YouTube channel as well. Before we move on to the YouTube portion, for the newsletter, sometimes people are like, what do I even put in an email? It sounds like you have a lot of case studies and data, and you have enough touch points and questions coming in from the audience, Twitter, whatever, that you have no shortage of things to talk about. Is that accurate? How do you keep track of that? Or do you ever struggle with writer's block or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. No, I would say that while I get a lot of those questions, they all tend to bucket out into kind of similar themes. So it's it's a new question that's very similar to the one from last month, which is very similar to what I wrote about 2 months ago. So yeah, no, there's definitely writer's block, and it can be really hard to break through that sometimes. There's a lot of different ways to kind of try to tackle that. I think that I will often, there's a number of different ways I go back to it. ChatGPT is great for brainstorming a lot of stuff, but I find it's terrible at brainstorming for this newsletter specifically. So I've tried that a bunch. I use it to brainstorm a lot of other stuff, but it's terrible for this. So that's out. I do like to go back to past emails that worked well and then try to look at the thread that I was tapping into, the greater theme, if you will, and then think about the questions that would come out of that. And so I did an email one time on schema, for example, schema markup and how to use rank math for it. It's a common problem people have from individual site owners all the way up to big businesses, right? And that got such great feedback that I ended up doing a 4-part series on how to set up different aspects of schema and how to deep dive schema topics, right? So that's a great way, is to go to a higher level topic I addressed and then break it apart into its nuances. And then I also try to look at current events and current trends in the industry, right? And there's a lot of current events and current trends that you can explore and then kind of figure that out. And then my favorite one is to merge a current event with like a past success. So like, I don't know, how does the introduction of AI impact schema, for example? Now, I haven't written about that, but that could be something that's very interesting because AI is very current on everyone's mind. It's in the news a lot. It's something that's trending in my industry. And schema was something that performed well. How do we put that together into a topic? So this is kind of how I ideate when I don't have something clear and presentable to write about.
That's great, especially the mixing and matching. Like, I mean, that was a perfect example. It could be like algorithm updates plus some other thing that you know is really popular, and you know that's going to work. And you have a couple iterations or, just pairings that you can do. That's pretty cool. And yeah, what a nerdy topic. A 4-part series on schema. I mean,
hey, that was January.
Yeah. Like, you know, you're listening to the right show if you're like, oh, wow, I want to check out that 4-part series on schema.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's some, that's one of those words like canonicalization and schema. Like you just say it and you're like, I feel awesome. And then you say it around someone who's not in this world and they're like, what are you out of your mind? Like, sorry, definitely not an SEO.
Yeah, we are out of our mind. What other thing? I have been listening to the Morgan Housel podcast. I read a couple of his books, and I think he quoted someone else, but basically he said to write in finance, but you could fill in whatever niche. You have like 10 topics, and then your job is to write about those 10 topics every week and just make it sound a little bit different. And I think it's the same for SEO. Again, fill in whatever your niche is. You probably know the majority of the questions or topics that you know the audience is interested in, and you could just hit those. And it could get boring after a while, but like if you internalize that and you realize, okay, I just have to put a different spin on it. This known topic plus AI, this known topic plus algorithm updates. Like you'll never run out of topics, basically. There's so many things you can cover.
Exactly. I mean, and you know, remembering on top of that you're a person, and the more personal you make your writing, in this case, newsletter, like you can even take a topic that's already been addressed, but from your personality, from your approach. Things like podcasts and newsletters have the ability to really impact people on a personal level. I've been blown away by that. I did not realize that about hosting a podcast. Like people feel like they know you. Like I've had people stop me in the streets. I've had people stop me at church and they feel like they know me. And that's weird to me because my clients don't feel that way necessarily. Like I think there's this power of a newsletter and a podcast to really enter in and be a personal experience. And so I think people maybe forget that sometimes. And so you can even just put your personal spin or take on something. And that can often, as long as you're adding value along with that, be a very good approach as on top of all the different ideas you shared.
And on that note, I was chatting with, I don't know, it was an interview recently, but someone who also has a newsletter, and they intentionally started putting in like little personal stories of the week, maybe a little snapshot of a trip they recently went on. And I started doing that a few years ago. I, just like this other person, started getting responses back like, hey, you know, this is amazing that you did this, really cool. I'm glad you're sharing more of your personal stuff. So do you put some of those personal things in the emails as well, even though they're, you know, pretty much irrelevant to the topic? Like we may try to rope it in and make it relevant, but sometimes it's just like, hey, you want to share this thing because your family did something cool.
I try to do all the time. I actually try to make it almost the basis of my, like, let me try to answer it with just what I did. I've done this before where I was talking about content updating. And I use the analogy because I'm like, hey, here's what I'm doing in my spare time. I'm taking my family to Disneyland, and I really don't understand this whole like Genie Plus thing. And so I made my search for trying to figure it out with my family as the theme for updating content in my email. And so it really personalized it because I was able to like put a photo in of like going to Disneyland and stuff. And ironically, one of the websites I featured in the email is actually, I didn't even know this, on my email list, right? We did our annual board meeting and retreat for the company in Lake Tahoe last year. So I was doing a lot of research on how to book an Airbnb in Lake Tahoe. And I used that as a theme for one of my emails. It wasn't about Lake Tahoe, but I just took that theme, the personalized theme, and made that the underpinning of how I outlined the SEO example for that email. So yes, to your point, 100%.
All right. Anything else with the newsletter before we move on to YouTube specifically?
No, I'll let you take all the emails that come from deleting content or deleting subscribers. I published that recently that I'd done that with Weekend Growth. And man, a lot of people really did not like that. So expect a few emails saying that's a dumb idea. But besides that, no, we can leave the newsletter where it is.
I don't know. Yeah, someone told me that too. And I had typically cleaned stuff out, and then they were like, oh, the email provider said don't do that. And I'm like, well, they have an incentive for you to never delete anyone from your list. So it's like there must be some middle ground. But yeah. I don't know. I don't know what we're
I'm just having a good time. No, we covered that. And I do think it's good for list health. Don't just cut everyone. But yeah, at some point, like if they haven't opened an email in a while. But yeah, I was surprised by that. But no, we covered it.
All right, cool. So YouTube. You've obviously been recording podcasts over at Niche Pursuits. YouTube's a little bit of a different animal. The good part is like you have the photography and probably videography background. So like you know how to do lighting and you probably had a lot of the equipment. But what were some of the initial challenges for hopping over on YouTube?
Oh man, everyone thinks I should be good at YouTube because I've hosted a podcast for a long time, because I have an audio, video, photo background. And I will say that I consider myself to be pretty awful at YouTube. And whether or not you think I'm awful or not is irregardless to how challenging I think it is. I think it's so hard. Podcasting comes very naturally to me, and I love podcasting. I love hosting a podcast. Some of the tenets that make podcasting fun, I think you're the same way, is you're conversational, personable. But I think you share this about as a personality trait, is that you have this kind of insatiable curiosity. And so hosting a podcast is really fun because you're just in the seat of asking questions. And if you're engaged with what they're doing, it's really easy to ask these questions. It's really fun. And then if you're locked into the listener avatar, you can almost be that listener, that common listener, and ask those questions. That's not what YouTube is about at all. YouTube is about delivering a very, very well thought out and somewhat concise answer or process. And it's almost opposite of at least the way I approach podcasting. So I found it to be very hard. I've worked hard at it because I think it's a really good skill, and I love YouTube as a user and as a medium for a brand to present itself on. But I find it so challenging, and my hat goes off to people who do really well with it.
You did a lot of public speaking. Can you talk about the scope of what you have done as a public speaker, which I'll tie into in a second, but what's your public speaking experience like overall?
I've done a nationwide tour of 40 cities, doing the same talk every night, city after city. I've spoken at, probably over 100 conferences in a kind of a 1 hour or 45-minute type, a keynote or presentation. I've spoken on some larger platforms like Creative Live, where you put together a 3-day 6-hour per day presentation that gets packaged up into an 18-hour workshop and then sold. But the initial 3-day event is live. So you're interacting with an in-person audience plus a global audience that's watching of 10 to 20, 30,000 people at a time. So I've done a lot of it over the years, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, I would say that's a lot for even a professional speaker. That's quite a bit. So, and the point that I'm going to tie back, as a public speaker, which I've done very little compared to you, but you want to say things in as few words as possible and, get in and get out. And I don't know if you did Toastmasters. Did you do Toastmasters?
Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
The speeches, there's constraints, right? I've only been to a couple meetings myself, but.
Did you do the marble in the glass bowl one?
No, I didn't. What's that?
Every time you stutter, you say any of those, they drop a marble in the glass bowl.
No, luckily the group that I was in, they just noted it and they told me afterwards. But it is shocking how quickly you can clean that stuff up, even when they're not doing the glass marble thing,
totally.
Which sounds. Yeah, you would just forget what you were going to say. That sounds really rough. But the thing is, people could get better. It's amazing the progress that you could make. So the point I was going to make is you have the skills, and for YouTube, it's just making them pretty short, pretty concise, at least from my perspective, I'm not trying to optimize and play along with the algorithm all the way. We know that can get a person into trouble if you just go follow the algorithm and rely on it completely. But yeah, why do you think YouTube has been more challenging? Like we pointed out, and I guess a lot of other people, like you have all the building blocks to do it, yet it's still pretty challenging.
Yeah. You bring up a good point. I think a lot of the aspects of YouTube, I'm able to do well. And a lot of it does go back to just kind of my native public speaking training, like voice inflection and knowing when to lean in and lean out and dramatic pause and effect. And so those things, yes, that's fine. And that is where a lot of people will fail on YouTube is they're boring or they don't hold a tone or a conversation. The part I struggle with is not storytelling, but quickly getting to a point. And I, as a trained public speaker, you have to do more than just say something of value. You have to impact them. They have to walk away, not just going, wow, I just took 25 pages of notes, but they have to walk away inspired to actually do something about it. And I'm not saying that's not the case on YouTube, but it's more focused on what you share and not how you share it, at least with what I've done so far. Now, there are brands that do a great job of doing more than that. And those are much bigger productions. And you have to put in that production value to kind of get that to inspire people. Whereas on a public stage, you don't have those other things at your disposal. And so it's just you, your content, and your connection with the audience on stage. And on YouTube, you kind of get more of that by the after effects or the additional things you bring to the content.
Way to explain it. And you're definitely right about the storytelling aspect. And YouTube is hard, by the way. I mean, not to say that it's not, but you have, like I said, you have some of the great building blocks that a lot of people just struggle with just in general. So I'm curious.
Again, and just to put a fine point on it, Doug, and I'll just tell this quick story. Like if you're at a conference and you're there with someone who is a trained speaker or has spoken before, I notice when you get up to leave. I notice when you get up and walk out. Like, and it doesn't affect me, but I'm gauging all that in the moment. I'm looking people in the eye because I know my content well. I'm not nervous. And so I'm like there and I'm looking in the eyes of people as I speak. I'm watching what they lean into. I'm catering my presentation to the audience. I can't do that on YouTube. I can't watch how you're engaging. So it's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just there are aspects of it that I realized fly in the face of what I used to do so routinely on stage. So anyways, that's the tough part about YouTube. You don't know when people are scrolling past your video or moving on. So it's just a different engagement.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you don't know until after you publish it. And then sometimes the algorithm starts liking your video that did terrible at first. And yeah, it's really hard to, reverse engineer and then recreate that. So that's a great point with the real-time feedback from an audience. Have you ever done like stand-up comedy?
No, I have not. I love watching stand-up comedy and I am blown away by, again, as a public speaker, to watch them get up. And I'm always with my wife, I'm like, how did he do that transition? Like all that stuff blows me away. I think that they, on the world of public speaking, are just on a pedestal above anything else.
Yeah. It's correct. I love stand-up too. I've never done an open mic, but I don't know if I will. Like I've talked about it enough where maybe I'd try it. But every now and then, if I do have some small talk, then I will try to throw in more jokes than the average speaker, which, if no one's telling jokes, then even just a little bit
goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious if you had any specific videos that were a big success. And I'm curious about either the topic or other details of why you think it went well.
I mean, none of my videos have gone really well, but they've, I've gotten enough of them to do well enough that I keep doing them. So we'll leave it at that. But 2 of the top 5 videos have been tutorials. They've been really long, so they're opposite of the algorithm, right? They're like 45 minutes, 35-minute tutorials, but kind of like one of my emails. They're really long, but if it's a topic you're interested in, they're probably one of the best solutions out there. So they just cover the topic super in depth. And that probably does cater more to my style. Like if I'm going to write you an email, I'm going to write you everything I think. So that's probably does well just because it's very native to me. And while a smaller audience, because it doesn't fit the algorithm, and it is a very maybe niche down topic, it is really long and in depth. And then I'd say 2 of the other 5 are very much kind of how I described the newsletter. They're kind of something that people are interested in with a specific use case or twist to it. And so again, it's like how to use ChatGPT and images to update your content quickly would be another topic that's done really, really well. Because I'm taking a concept like updating content that a lot of people think about, but broadly speaking, unless I'm a large account or get really lucky, I'm never going to really rank anywhere in YouTube for that. But when I add these additional components to kind of niche the idea down a bit, make it a little more, we'll say long tail, then it appeals to a certain audience segment. And then one of the videos that's done really well is just on probably my most successful side hustle. And I just think people in general are very interested in side hustles. So that's a whole other topic, which I know we'll probably talk about at some point. But side hustles in general, I think that's an underlying topic that I didn't really realize my audience was as interested in, but that video has done well.
How much do you look at your peers or competitors out there on YouTube for ideas? And the reason why I ask is I want to make sure I'm just not copying what everyone else is talking about and unfortunately coming up with like some derivative thing where I'm just putting my spin on what someone else has done a really good job on. So I try not to be in the echo chamber so much. And hopefully I'm publishing more unique content because of that. So how much do you look to your peers for ideas for videos?
It's really funny you bring that up. Never. I'm on all of my peers' email lists, and I love reading their emails. I never watch anybody else's, well, not never, very rarely watch anybody else's YouTube videos in my industry. I have a few people I do follow, and I do watch some of theirs, but I really don't watch much in that. And to your point, like I try to base my YouTube videos on what has been successful in the newsletter. And so it's much less based on kind of what others are doing or what others are seeing success in. I'd probably benefit from doing it more, to be fair. Like I should look at like, hey, which YouTube topics in my niche, my industry are performing well, and kind of what's my version of that? What's my take on that? What's my approach to that? Like that's a trending topic. I should do a video on that. I don't tend to do that though. I do tend to go look back at my email and say, okay, over the last 3 months, which emails have done really well? How does that topic translate over to a YouTube video? Okay, that's the direction I'll look for.
I do occasionally see a video or a topic where I'm like, I have a take on that, but usually I sit on it for a little while and then, I'll bring something unique. But, I do see some creators, not just YouTube, but anywhere, like people are like, okay, let's just analyze our competitors and we'll do an article or a video or a podcast on that topic and we'll just do our take on it. And that is it's so highly derivative and we can create anything we want. We may as well do something a little more original. So yeah, it makes sense to be original and come up with your own ideas.
And it can be hard being on everybody's email list. It can be hard because you're like, oh, like there have been more than one time where I'm like, I literally was writing an email about that exact topic and so just emailed. And now I'm going to look like I copied him. I've already written the email. I feel like emailing him, be like, look, I already wrote the email. Here it is. It's already been built in ConvertKit. And so that can be a challenge, right? Like, because I'm very sensitive to that. And I was just laughing with someone about, imitation is the highest form of flattery and how it's hard to get your mind around sometimes. But yeah, I think it comes down to like, kind of going back to your point about the colleague of yours that commented on how there's about 10 topics in your niche. And then really it's about kind of what are you adding to those 10 topics, whether it's a timeliness factor, whether it's a unique perspective factor, whether it's your own results factor, whether it's that combined with, several other items. What are you doing to make it unique? And at the end of the day, you've got to kind of come back to what true north looks like for you.
As we wrap up here, what's coming up next for Weekend Growth, whether the newsletter or YouTube? What do you have on the table for the next, say, year or 18 months?
Yeah, well, a lot of the audience I have in that list has been going through a lot of changes in the things they're focusing on, right? So In the SEO world, there's almost like a line in the sand drawn between businesses that are quote unquote, and I do use air quotes, true businesses versus businesses that aren't true businesses because they make their money from a third party, right? So you got a content site, you got an affiliate site getting crushed in the last 6 to 12 months by Google. Then you've got local businesses, e-commerce businesses, SaaS businesses, stuff where people are selling stuff on their site or on their locale, and they're doing really well. And so this line in the sand type event is creating a real dichotomy in terms of what kind of content people want. So it will be an interesting next, probably call it quarter, 3 months, where I'm going to really try to tackle a couple different topics on the email list and try to get a lot of interaction going to try to understand where people want to go from here. It's a very weird world to live in, having content sites, serving local businesses, seeing our local businesses by and large up and to the right the last 6 to 12 months, yet seeing content websites like my own and all my, many of my peers going down, 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 right? And it's kind of interesting being in both worlds throughout the day. So trying to bring both to the table, but really listening to the audience more so than probably ever before to see which direction we go. Because I can go both directions. I can talk about how I'm pivoting in my little side hustle world. I can also talk about, hey, here's how to succeed in SEO with e-com, with your SaaS product, with your local business, because we're working with all those clients on a day in, day out basis. And so it'll be interesting to see which direction we go, but I think you'll see a bifurcated approach and a lot of listening and interaction happening from me.
I'm very interested too. I'm sort of at the same kind of crossroads, and I think there's a void here where a lot of people were talking about content sites or people were earning money from content sites, and now it's just kind of up in the air. There's a huge opportunity. We don't know where it is, right? But when things get shaken up, I think a lot of people with maybe a higher skill level, we're kind of all back on a more even playing field, I think, from a certain standpoint. Of course, our experience pays off. And if you're really experienced with content sites, it's going to pay off in the long run. But yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty out there right now. And we're recording this early April of 2024, just so people could think back in the future of what it was like back
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. And for anybody listening, like, no matter which world you're in, know that we're all working in a business environment on a combination of platforms that are out of our control. We do have control of some things. And so more and more, as you grow, the more you can control, the better. But at the end of the day, even if you're, say, with a content site or with an affiliate site, like there still is a core there of skill sets that you have, that you developed, and that you can utilize in the broader scope of things. And so, back to what the email will look like. I mean, it's going to look like trying to serve the audience that is on the list. I just have to make sure I understand that a little bit better because we're at some crossroads here. We've been at crossroads in the past. This is definitely a crossroads. We'll have more in the future. But when you have a list of people that are looking to read what you have to share, you've got to make sure you understand which direction in the crossroads people want to know more about.
Jared, it's always fun to catch up. Where should people find you? And we'll link up so you don't have to spell everything out. But where do you want people to go to check out your stuff?
Yeah. Agency is 201creative.com. Weekend Growth, blog, newsletter, all that is weekendgrowth.com. Same on YouTube. And then on Twitter, which is I'll interact there probably daily. Not as much as I used to, but that's just my name, Jared Bauman.
All right, cool. We'll link it all up. And thanks a lot, Jared. Hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Doug. Been a pleasure.
If you want to learn more about Jared, you can follow the links in the description. Really appreciate him taking the time to chat with me. And if you like the show, you can do me a favor, make sure you're followed or subscribed wherever you're consuming this. Leave a review out there on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you can leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, like the channel, like the video, leave a comment, all that kind of stuff. It does help out. Any kind of interaction algorithmically, it does help out. So really appreciate it out there, and we'll catch you on the next episode.